And good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the United States Bowling Congress campus here in Arlington. My name is Mike Flanagan in the Bowl TV studios. And today we've got quite a show for you as we're going to discuss urethane bowling balls over the course of the next, what's scheduled to be 1 hour, but I would assume is going to be close to an hour and a half or more. Today, we're going to go over a lot of information. And towards the end of the program, if we haven't answered the questions that you may have, we're going to open it up to all the questions you may have. And we may get to them as we go through each one of these segments here today. It's quite an honor to even be asked to come down here to have this show and let me be able to host it here today. As just like many of you, I've been looking at this thing from a consumer standpoint and from just a bowler standpoint. I just want to say on the record that I haven't been involved in any of the decision-making processes whatsoever. And I think that's part of the reason why they wanted me to be here today to facilitate this, because I'm just like many of you. I've got some notes here, a few things I want to go over, some frequently asked questions, amongst other things. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about is this is not new. There's been bowling ball controversy that has happened in our sport over the years. Back in the 80s, we saw soaking, but it was with urethane bowling balls, altered bowling balls. We all know about that, or at least those of us that are in our 40s like myself and one of our guests we're going to have on our show later here today. And here we are 40 years later after that with a similar issue or this with the same material. So also, it's okay to have an opinion on this topic. It's okay for you to say that you like that we have urethane bowling balls or that we don't like having urethane bowling balls. That's okay. It's okay to love the new rules. It's okay to hate the new rules. This is going to impact some of you positively. It's going to impact some of you negatively. And I think everybody understands that. And that's why we've seen so many people be so vocal on social media and in bowling centers. And that's why there's so much talk about this. I also believe because urethane's been reintroduced to the bowling population that there's many people that have seen this happen over the last couple of years, and there's been no action to this. It's just kind of just been the wild, wild west. We've heard hardness rules. We've heard all those things, and we're going to get to the experts here today. Over time, I've learned a lot in this industry. I've worked for ball manufacturers. I've been involved in being on this campus. I've ran bowling centers. I've kind of done it all. And I would say early in my career, whenever I would see something happen, I immediately would jump to social media and say, this is a problem. You know, what are these people thinking? Over the years, I've gotten a little bit wiser and brighter, still got a lot to learn. But one thing that I have learned over time is that in our industry, we do have a lot of people that do a very, very good job at their job. And here at the International Bowling Campus, there's a research center downstairs with a lab with a lot of different tools, and they work round the clock to make sure that the data that they put together is factual, and then they bring in the right people to make decisions. So I think throughout this broadcast today, whatever your opinions may be, I'd like everybody to have an open mind here today as we look at everything and trust the experts and what they find. Again, you don't have to agree with everything that we discuss here today, and we do look forward to answering your questions. Some of the most frequently asked questions that were prepared ahead of time before the show here today that I think I can answer some of those for you is urethane has been back now for a while. What makes the rule changes now necessary? And I will tell you, talking to people in the industry and then to the folks here at the International Bowling Campus, and there's no reason to believe that what they're telling us wouldn't be true, is that there's been a lot of bowler feedback that has been asked, why are you not doing anything about this urethane problem? I don't believe that people here were just like, hey, you know, we need to just get rid of urethane. No, they field questions and a lot of calls here. And in the industry, it's been a hot topic. I've heard it, Bowl TV, whether I'm calling action at a PBA event, a PWBA event, urethane's a topic between ball reps, even fans of bowling, to the competitors. So why do we need to do something now about this problem? And it's because of the feedback that we received from the bowlers. USBC has received. People say this is super overcomplicated. And at first glance, I mean, I got to agree with you. I mean, I feel like this is really complicated. Why can't we just have one rule and that's it between the PBA, the USBC, collegiate competitions, PWBA, um, uh, all the junior gold? That's the most complicated one. Why can't we just have that? And that's because seasons and qualifiers have already started. Collegiate bowling, uh, the teams have already gathered and placed their ball orders and that for the competition season. Junior gold qualifiers have already started taking place. So the old rules are still in effect. So you kind of have to have a hybrid rule for this season. So that's one of the reasons why you can't just do a blanket change, one blanket change. Also, the Open Championships have 120,000 bowlers that show up with bowling balls, and eliminating urethane right now would have a huge economic impact on those bowlers. And what are they going to do going into the tournament? So you got to think about all the people that participate in all these different events, and that's why they have so many different rules. Another question that's very prevalent is, why not just ban all urethane balls? Well, how many people are affected by that? And focusing on the events that need the change is what's happening now. High impact with low disruption in the bowling market. So another question here is, why are the balls banned for portions of competition like junior gold, qualifying and collegiate regular season, but not other portions of the same competition like junior gold match play and collegiate postseason? I already touched on that, but again, junior gold is already having qualifiers taking place under the old rules, and this is and then they switch over to the PBA rule, which is the 78 hardness balls for qualifying. But then, like the U.S. Open new rule would be, and the Masters, where there's no urethane for the match play. But I believe, and we'll get into that a little bit later, why they're doing that is to allow the players to still have some urethane because that's what they had in their bags. That's what they were used to using. And then when they get in a little bit further in the tournament, to be able to change their ball cards, add more pieces of equipment, swap things out, things like that. But I'll get to the experts when it comes to that. And then why is USBC doing this now? Well, first of all, it speaks to their USBC mission, vision, and promise to the bowlers that they're supposed to govern anything that's happening within our sport. All the signs and feedback from bowlers, as I mentioned before, I'm repeating myself, is that we need to take some action here. There is a problem within our sport with urethane bowling balls, and action needs to be taken because the community has spoken. Also, very few are asking why the USBC has chose to do nothing. Like, why would they do nothing? So, in conclusion here, my words, let's face it, urethane bowling balls are having a major impact on the sport, more so than any other surface we've ever seen. This is the second wave of urethane's influence, now amplified by advances in bowlers' techniques and lane conditioning. Lane machines are a lot different than they were in the 80s, and the oils that are used are a lot different. But the most important one here that I want everybody to think about throughout today's broadcast is, back in the 80s, they didn't have reactive resin bowling balls. Today, we got reactive resin bowling balls. And when you have urethane and reactive simultaneous use on the lanes, it's creating what I believe, my opinion, nobody told me to say this, but I believe it's starting to point us to a one-dimensional game. Can't tell you how many times we've been on Bowl TV covering the PBA Tour, and you see a couple people move to urethane, and everybody has to get to urethane. The ball reps nowadays, I don't care what you say, their number one goal and role out there to their players is to be able to say, this is how many people threw urethane on that pair. This is how you need to adjust based off the urethane. So I will also say this before we move along and we get into the experts here and we start showing some videos and some great things that are prepared here today, is this sport with reactive balls did remove oil from the lane and did change the patterns. Okay, they did. They did change the patterns. Urethane bowling balls are affecting the patterns in a different way, and it is moving people to go to the certain part of the lane. When you had reactive bowling balls, you had to move in. They burnt up, turned into lofting contests. So this isn't the first time we've seen this problem, and I can't wait to talk about it today. So I believe that covers my open here today. Glad you're with us here on USBC YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, give them a subscribe. They're really close to 100,000 subscribers. And let's take a minute now to roll back the clock a little bit. Let's take a look at the history of hardness of bowling balls and when rules were put into motion about these urethane bowling balls.
In 1973, changes in competitive bowling prompted the introduction of hardness regulations to address instances where ball surfaces were chemically softened. The Professional Bowlers Association established a minimum hardness specification of 75 Shore D in 1974, while the American Bowling Congress introduced its own standard in 1976, setting the limit at 72.
To stay over the historic 75 hardness at the PBA, all these balls were being made at 79, 80 hardness for the most part.
By the late 1990s, with reactive resin becoming the dominant choice in competitive play and urethane use declining to negligible levels, the PBA discontinued hardness checks at their tournaments in 2001. For similar reasons, testing at the ABC Championships was deemed an inefficient use of time and resources, so it was discontinued there as well. To further illustrate how irrelevant hardness had become, the comprehensive ball motion study that the USBC conducted in collaboration with World Bowling in 2008 focused almost exclusively on understanding the interaction between reactive resin equipment, lane conditions, and player style, with little anticipation of urethane's resurgence.
In the 2008 ball motion study, it was a collaborative effort to go identify what are the most influential specs on ball motion. So they looked at the modern technology and what they saw as most influential, right? If you think about being in the world in 2008, no one was talking about urethane balls, no one was talking about hardness, because hardness had just gotten to a point where it's like, we have these reactive balls from the early 90s, they all hook a ton, they're all plenty hard, they're passing all these field checks. The field checks, move their way out over time because it seems like a waste of time. It's natural to think in the realm of what's going on with the current day's technology to focus there. What was going on in the early 2000s? Particle bowling balls. We got people putting glass pieces in the cover, people putting sand, people trying to fill their urethane with all these different particles to get hook in the oil. So naturally, surface roughness was a key variable in that study, not only because it was what's going on at the time, but because the balls being used in the study exhibited special qualities around that, and it's what led to us having a surface roughness specification.
All right, we welcome you guys back into the USBC campus here in Arlington. Again, my name is Mike Flanagan, hosting here today, and I bring in my couple of guests here today. First of all, to my right is the USBC Senior Director of Equipment Specification, Tom Frenzel, who we just saw in that video. Thanks for being here, Tom.
Thanks for having me.
And then to my left is one of the guys I love to talk bowling with, and he's the USBC Lane Pattern Development Lead, Nick Hoagland. Nick, thanks for being here as well.
Thanks, Mike.
Here today on such an interesting topic here today. So we just saw in the video there, Tom, and this is the portion where I'm really going to lean into you to talk about some of these things. In that video that we just saw, we saw that urethane was an issue moons ago, as I like to call, back in the 80s. And then there for a period of time, we had reactive resin bowling balls to where we really didn't, in that report that you guys put together, we really didn't have to measure hardness. But then now when urethane balls have come back, now you guys have to measure the hardness again. So talk a little bit about, kind of what you're doing and a little bit more about that video here today.
Yeah, anytime we do research around here at the campus, we try to start as far back to the beginning as we can. So that's what we did with our hardness research. Well, when was the spec put in? And you go back to the stories that soaking was a problem. 1973, we had soaking out on the PBA tour. The following year, the PBA put out a 75 hardness spec with the durometers, which at the time was a different operating procedure. They actually had a special jig that you could clamp down to the ball and test them. But all the problems you can find it in Bowler's Journal, testing technique and temperature and oil on the balls. They're talking about all that back in the day. And ABC made in 1976 adopted 72 hardness for ball approval. And all those specs just moved forward over time. But it really started around tampering in finding these soft balls in the field.
Yeah. So when you talk about tampering, right, I think that's one of the things that I didn't really realize, right? Because it's difficult for anyone to wrap their head around something where there's someone doing something that isn't legal or that is not ethical. But you guys have seen several cases of this tampering. Is it more prevalent than many of us novices believe is happening? I've seen a few reports, but is this something that's going on a lot right now?
It's hard to say exactly how prevalent it is, other than it's happened recently. We had some admissions to it earlier this year, which kind of led off another segment that we're going to get into later on that. But it's hard to say exactly how prevalent it is. There's strong rules in place against it. Rule 17A, don't tamper with your equipment, right? Unfair tactics. And the consequences of that can be severe. You can have your whole membership suspended and taken away from you. So it's definitely something you shouldn't be doing.
Well, not only that, but it's unsafe. Back in the 80s, after doing some research and talking to some folks, there was a bowler that lost his life over, putting chemicals into a bowling ball, trying to gain a competitive advantage out on the lanes, which you never wanted to see that. I am gonna come over to Mr. Hoagland here for just a second. Nick, with the tampering of bowling balls, with the soaking in the 80s, you've been around a long time. The folks that don't know, Nick Hoagland used to do the lanes for the PBA Tour during the Steve Miller days, who just recently passed away. And I know that was a big one for you. So my condolences to you, and that we lost Steve Miller, who gave so much to bowling. But when we look at what happened back in the 80s, and you've been around a while, what do you see with the tampering from the 80s to today, like how that impacts things?
Well, I think that it's becoming something that we're talking more about again. When I worked on the PBA Tour in the early 2000s, when the urethane balls were not in play or not popular, this concern didn't come up. And I think, as you've alluded to, and it's in the report, that there's more of this potentially going on than we know. And so we need to make sure that we have rules in place and standards in place to protect the integrity of the tournaments.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got another video that speaks more about this from the urethane reports. Let's go ahead and take a look at it.
But in many of the top international competitions in the late 2000s, some of the world's high-level players discovered that older urethane models provided a smoother, more controllable transition to the pocket than reactive resin. During this period, several Storm staff players requested and received permission to drill competitor-manufactured urethane balls for isolated use in international tournaments. This practice was short-lived, ending when Storm developed its own solution to meet the competitive need, bringing the natural urethane ball to the market at a hardness of 78D in 2009. In March 2014, Storm released the Pitch Black at 79.9D. And in August 2016, Ebonite introduced the Purple Hammer at an improved hardness of 72.07D. Meanwhile, the removal of the PBA's 75D specification in 2001 prompted a gradual reduction in manufacturing hardness levels across the industry.
On the approved ball list, there's 7,300 plus ball models on the approved ball list, and we see 2 of all of those. So just since we started tracking that list in the mid-90s, we've tested over 15,000 bowling balls, right? And hardness has been a specification for that whole time. But we have hardness reports all the way back to the 70s when that spec was released. Paper reports that were done on a typewriter, and you go through the archives to go find that stuff, and you put it all together. And what we saw is, if we took the average hardness reading of all the approval bottles we had data on for the approval year, that yes, back in the mid-90s, you're in the 78, 79 on average. We've got balls softer and harder than that, but the average for the year is up in that 79, almost 80 range. And as you move forward through time, and when the PBA stops checking for 75, when the ABC tournament stops checking for hardness in the squad room at the national tournament, some different checks and balances kind of go away. And it got down to the point where in the mid-20 teens, we've seen balls approved like the Purple Hammer all the way down to the 72 levels.
As the popularity of the Purple Hammer grew as a result of its successful use on the PBA Tour, in 2019, the USBC initiated research on the field testing process, as well as conducting hardness field testing at the 2020 US Open and the 2020 PBA World Series of Bowling. These tests helped confirm a phenomenon that would be later documented, which is that urethane balls tended to measure softer with use.
In 2023, we released a hardness research report of essentially 2.5, 3 years of testing of how balls change with use and does it affect the performance. And what we ended up getting to is that when we throw these balls for 200 shots and we see a hardness drop from a 73.5 to a 68, we don't see it hook more than it originally hooked. Right? We just don't see that. And sometimes these balls are dropping 4, 5, 6 points just by throwing them down the lane. In contrast, we had access to a urethane model that was produced at 2 different hardness readings. We had some that were made at about 79 and some that were made at about 73. And with about a 5-point difference in hardness in our 2 samples out of the box, we saw a 3-board performance change in hook. So it became very clear when you make the entire ball softer, you're changing the entire cover stock, right? But when you're throwing the ball down the lane, you're acquiring oil on the outer shell, you're applying damage to the outer part of it, but you're not necessarily getting down deep into it and changing the whole thing. So what we believed was happening is when it's soft all the way through, it allows for more deformation, a larger footprint, all the things we say. But when it's just wear and tear on the cover or oil in the measurement system, that didn't show as a larger footprint. That didn't show as a performance impact at all.
And we welcome you back into the studios. Mike along here with Tom and Nick. One quick programming note, Walter Ray Williams Jr., we see you watching here today. One of the greatest players of all time, if not the greatest player of all time. I said a couple of times about how this took place in the 80s, and I understand that it did take place in the 70s, but when I think urethane, I think 80s. So thanks for helping me get my facts straight. Tom, we had a lot of stuff that was going on in that video there. You guys did a beautiful job, by the way, putting together that video, and it's about 22 minutes long. It's on the USBC YouTube channel. It was put out last week on Friday. We're using excerpts from it. If you haven't checked it out, everybody, you should definitely check that one out. But the 2 big things there was the balls get softer over time, and measurements in the field went away, but not necessarily, of course, here, because you guys have to inspect all the balls. So where would you like to take and expand upon what we had there in that segment?
Well, I think there's just really that segment is really diving into all of the urethane hardness research that kicked off in the opening of 2020. We were out in the field at those sites. We learned a whole lot, right? Of course, you see the chart with manufacturer hardness going down over time, where, in 1996, the average hardness of approval balls was up in the 79 range. And those are average dots, right? You got harder ones and softer ones. As you go down the line and those field measurements go away, well, things approach the limit that they're held to. And then what they're held to their approval samples being over 72. You can just see it. As things went away, they just naturally evolved down there, and different manufacturers did it at different rates, but that's the overall of the industry we're showing in that video.
So basically, if we're not keeping an eye on that, or out in the field, you're not seeing testing taking place, the manufacturers are competing against each other to put together the best products on the market. And over time, if a ball gets softer, what does a softer ball do for the average bowler as opposed to a harder ball?
So with our footprint research, what you find is if a ball has a lower hardness, it has a bigger contact patch. If it's got a bigger contact patch, that's going to introduce new variables for its friction on the lane, in the oil and on the dry. So it's just going to interact with the lane differently. Typically, a larger footprint we're finding is earlier and more overall hook.
So when you say footprint and you talk about those things, you're talking about the difference between my pin right here touching the surface of this table as opposed to the other end of the pin touching this table. This pin is much more stable here on the table, as opposed to, I'm not a physics guy, but I'm just trying to understand. And I put that pin on there, though. That's going to definitely create a different ball roll.
Yeah, the physics of it's all very interesting because if you go to a physics textbook, like an undergraduate physics textbook, they might show you an argument where the contact area doesn't matter. If you took a large steel block, something that doesn't deform the standard is that the surface area doesn't matter as much, and it's like molecular interactions between the faces. But when you have something like a rubber, like a tire wheel on your car that squishes and deforms, contact patch becomes an issue. And people don't think of bowling balls as squishy, but everything in the real world deforms some, and these balls do deform, and you can see they have contact areas. Really, really hard balls, maybe less than 1/8 of an inch diameter, and then the softer balls would get up over 1/4 of an inch in some of these. So you definitely see contrast between them. We're accurate to 4/1000 of an inch, which you can see those differences for sure, right? So bowling balls deform, and that makes a difference.
Well, the first half of what you said, I have no idea what you said, but the second half I could identify with, which was we've all heard in bowling, and Nick, I'll come over to you with this. We've always talked about one of the most important thing when you have a bowling ball is the surface. I've always heard it's the tires of the bowling ball, right? And you said tires, so I was able to identify with you on that one, Tom.
Okay.
But Nick, as we talk about this topic here, softer over time, measurements in the field went away. You've seen a lot over the years. What's your interpretation of this?
Going through the report and the video was enlightening for me as well. I'm a student of lane maintenance, not as much on the technical ball end, but to see the softness over the course of 20 years from 05 to 25 get softer. And I'm not a physics guy, Tom, but the report shows the manufactured hardness goes lower, more of the surface touches the lane. More of those balls are being produced. That means more of the total surface touching the lane. Our lane surfaces are aging rapidly. And you can see why we're approaching oil levels that are unsustainable. 30. That's why the oil volumes keep going up. It's a combination of the bowling ball softness, also the lane surface erosion, and then rev rates of players. So comparing 20 years ago lane pattern development to today is comparing apples and oranges.
Yeah, reactive bowling balls too, a big factor in that. I believe that the next portion that we're going to get into is the one that I talked about a little bit, and it's the one that I really don't understand, which is the whole tampering thing. So let's take a look at what you guys have put together in regards to how tampering can affect bowling balls.
Do you think I could get in on one more section of what we just watched
Yeah.
real quick before we jump too far ahead? I would just like to point out, some really key learnings in there where manufactured hardness differences versus measurements in the field, right? So we find these measurements at these field checks, and they're, under the line. And that led to research that showed with the footprint gauge, the footprints aren't getting bigger with these balls that are used, right? But when they're made differently, when you have the same model in front of you and they're 5 points difference in hardness, the hook is earlier and it's 3 ports different, right? So when people are asking the question, we didn't find a problem with the use over time, but we do have a problem with balls under the spec, especially in the world of tampering. And how do the balls get there? So there's a lot that goes into it. I think we're going to get to it in the next section.
I believe you are. You want to take us to that video? You're doing such a good job here.
USBC research confirmed that soaking urethane balls in solvent can reduce hardness to extreme levels, with corresponding performance changes.
Obviously, with the return of soaking, versus the return of research about soaking. So what did our team do? We soaked some urethane bowling balls in acetone. The first test we did was just an overnight soak. So we took a modern urethane ball, about 74 hardness. We put it in a 2-gallon bucket. You set that in overnight and the ball comes out at 30 hardness. It dropped over 40-something points of hardness. And you take that to the lane with Earl, and you can basically stand about 21 and 11 left of where you would be with an unsoaked ball. A week later, the ball was nearly up to the 60s in hardness again. And it was only about 5 and 3 stronger than the baseline ball that wasn't soaked. 3 weeks later, the hardness had come all the way up into the range where we've seen drops from use that low. And it was only a board stronger than the baseline. So you take this urethane, you put it in the solvent tries to break it down and it swells out and it gets really soft. When we finally got it down to the glass and the footprint was larger than the field of view of the microscope, so you had to kind of roll it off to the side and you measure the edge. So the footprint gets much, much larger, and obviously a big performance change, but it heals over time. Great. Not great for governing it 4 weeks later when you hear a claim in February about something you can't measure until mid-March. But it doesn't stop there. We tested other balls, we soaked other balls. Urethane balls, we saw the same thing. With a reactive ball we tried, still a big drop in hardness, but not down all the way down to 30. And the performance change was only about, it was earlier. The hook was definitely earlier, but it was only about a board and a half different at the pins. The ball came back to hardness within 3 days, and it came back into hardness 2 points harder than it started.
USBC has experienced 2 major incidents in recent years involving urethane equipment, along with several additional reports, including one on the world stage, and anticipates that incidents of this nature will likely increase over time. The governance challenge lies in the recovery period for balls being tampered with, meaning a player could tamper with a ball and, if not tested immediately, present equipment that measures similarly to balls that have softened naturally over time. In one of the recent major incidents, the athlete's admissions were the only conclusive evidence, and without those admissions, USBC could not have proven tampering.
All right, we are back, everybody, having some internal discussion here as we roll through this very important information for all of you. But the big thing here that you and I were talking about, Nick, was just seeing how much of a difference that bowling ball hooks once it's been tampered with.
Yeah, it was enlightening to me. It's on page 10 of the report that immediately after soaking a bowling ball and testing it, it's a 20 and 10 ball reaction difference than what its original state was. But then that fluctuates. A week later, 3 weeks later, the ball gets back to its original state. And I operate tournaments like you as well, Mike. And in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, okay, how do I regulate this? Equipment doesn't stay overnight. And if somebody wanted to do something nefarious, they could, and so that's a concern from a regulatory standpoint. But I think Tom really, him and his team's research really shed a light on the differences of soaking from urethane to reactive balls.
Yeah, Tom, was this a big discovery for you? Was it something that you kind of knew anyway, or once you started going through all this and actually having to say, okay, I'm going to write down the sheet, we're going to do this, we're going to come back in the next day, what was that all like for you?
Right. Well, this was kind of our second series of soaking, right? So I think we did learn some new things this time around. We learned that just a bucket of acetone overnight can drop a ball over 40 points of hardness. When it came out of the bucket at 30 hardness, we were like, oh man, is Earl even going to be able to pick that up and throw it?
Really? And Earl is the robot here that you guys use to throw the ball the same way every time with the same amount of revolutions.
Yeah. So Earl stands for the Enhanced Automated Robotic Launcher. It's also named after Earl Anthony, and he's our staff bowler. A lot of people hear robotic bowler, they think perfect. I want you to take away really, really good, but everything in life has variation, of course. Earl can throw the ball anywhere from 10 to 25 miles an hour with anywhere from 0 to 900 revs on it. And I think our audience knows what that means, but he can basically copy any style there is. He's got really high versatility in axis tilt, anywhere from 0 to 45 degrees, rotation anywhere from 0 to 90 degrees. And basically what it means is he can copy almost any style there is, right? In this particular case, with those studies, we were using an upper end bowler, like 18 miles an hour, 500 revs type of guy, because that's the type of people we thought would be doing this kind of thing.
Okay.
Right. And without changing the ball speed, without changing the axis angles, it was 20 and 10 left. Right. You got to think about, you could probably slow down 2 miles an hour and you could probably open up your angles and move with any ball. But we're talking about throwing it the same with a robot being that much different. And we weren't even sure a 30 hardness ball would be viable. But if you put enough gusto on it, you have to give it some oomph to get it through the oil, to get it down there, because it wants to hook immediately, right? So for a high level player, it's usable. But I think we're all going to notice if you're 20 left of where you should be throwing it that fast. So I think soaking, it also identified some visual things. The ball looks like it's swollen up. It's bigger. The footprint was bigger than the field of view of the microscope, like I said. So there's definitely key factors on an extreme soak. But then you let the ball heal, right? And you let it heal to the point where it's within this gray area of use. And now it's a board stronger, and I can't tell that you tampered with it. That's a problem, right? That's a problem. So The problem is now in this area where it's still affected, the performance is up, but how do you identify it? What tool do you use? Because they kind of heal themselves over time.
Okay. What about immediate measurement? Like if you were able to just, have an infinite amount of money to police this thing, would there be a way to potentially police this thing immediately during competitions?
I mean, I think you could enforce the extremes. The ball you soaked last night that's 57, the durometer will throw that out on site. There's no problem with that. The problem is the sneaky, you kind of have a board and a half advantage, and now it's in the realm of all these devices measuring normal. So, immediate soaking, you could smell the acetone. The serial number looks swollen flat. Like there's just obvious things for a TD to go find, but these ones that have been allowed to rest and recover, harder to see what's going on there.
Okay, so let's forget about somebody dragging in an entire 5-gallon bucket of acetone. Okay, because to me, I still have a hard time wrapping my head around somebody possibly doing that.
Sure.
Even though I this stuff happens. What if you just had some acetone? I don't even know where, out in your car.
Sure.
Okay, and you had a 20-minute break in a block, and I took this ball with me, and I put some acetone on a rag, and I just hit it like an Aberlon pad.
Sure.
Would that affect my hardness of the ball? And if so, how much? I'm putting you on the spot.
Well, I'm glad you brought this up. We actually tested that. And what happens is when you're using it on a rag, the stuff actually flashes off so much faster that it doesn't really do the trick. You can't get hardly any change in the hardness from just using it on a rag really quickly in that type of scenario. We tried it on a ball spinner with a rag because that's what we're doing. We're researching what a pro shop would do, right? We want to know realistically what these guys can do because we're all trying to cheat the line. We're all trying to gain that advantage. Everyone tries to do that. So we tested it like that, and we didn't see a performance enhancement for that. It's mostly when it's been soaked and when it's been sealed in a bucket so the acetone can't evaporate. It has the time and contact to really get in there and damage the equipment.
And do you have any more data, or can I ask if a ball was soaked, like what the time frame is for it to go? You said it was altered 40 points, right? It went from 72, 73 to 30 something.
Right.
Like a day later, does it get to 50? 2 days later, does it get to 6? Like what's the time frame?
We had the 3 timestamps in the report as far as immediately, a week later, 3 weeks later. But you gotta assume it. It depends on, was it in the bucket for 15 hours or was it in the bucket for an hour, right? So based on how much damage you do, it's going to repair itself over time. It was a fun math thing that it actually fit a logarithmic curve. So if your kids are wondering when they're going to use logarithms in school, apparently it applies. But yeah, how much damage you do, how long it is, there's no key recipe to trick the rule here, but with the right time and experimentation, it could be identified.
And anytime soaking has been talked about in the public, again today, we would contribute to the problem. As soon as it gets in somebody's mind, people think, oh, how I could go try this or get a competitive advantage. And I think that's kind of what you guys have seen here. From what I hear is, when this first kind of came out, started kind of being a thing, okay, no big deal. But then when you start seeing, hey, here's a report, somebody writes about it, whatever, other people begin to kind of try that. Is that what you've seen? You've seen an increase in possible soaking situations?
Yeah, I think people see what they see, and it's interesting, right? What can I go do to this? Now, me personally, I wouldn't do it. I don't want to damage my equipment. I don't want to get suspended. Right. But people are interested because they want to know what it does. And there's nothing wrong with being curious until those balls get used to win money. And then it's a big problem. That's tampering. That's bad.
That is bad. Nick, what would you like to say about the tampering?
I just think it's an issue that can be great for tournament operators, USBC and independents as well. And so it's not just, like you said, soaking the ball in a bucket. It's the recovery time. And so that could be done a couple weeks ago, but use the ball a week later and it has a 1.5 or 2 void advantage. And if you ask any pro or high level bowler, that's a significant advantage in the competition. So I think it is fair.
and there's no waiting another month for that ball to make it to our lab after a complaint, which
Right.
is one of the reasons the drometers will be back out in the field, and we will be doing these spot checks on site at tournaments to find the big problems.
Right.
Can you say that again?
We will be moving forward with some more spot check testing at tournaments to find these big problems, these blatant cases.
I like that. I think that's important, and that's one of the biggest things that have been said to me from folks that think they're experts at this, but I do respect a lot of people's opinions on this. I have a couple old timers in the St. Louis area, Nick, you'll appreciate this, that have come to me and said, you really just need to police this thing. You really just need to police it. And to hear that you guys are going to increase the amount of testing out in the field is I think is really important. So kudos on that. That was something that I think I kind of missed even. Okay, that sets up the next part of the video you guys put together last week. We're playing segments from it again. I would like you to go check it out on the USBC YouTube channel. They're approaching 100,000 subs. Make sure you subscribe to that YouTube channel, everybody. I know how important that is. But let's go ahead and take a look at how the industry kind of helps shape some of these decisions as well.
In May 2025, USBC brought together a cross-section of industry experts to evaluate the evolving role of urethane balls and their impact on lane conditions, athlete development, and competitive equity.
The key things we were trying to get at out of this meeting were how these types of balls are impacting our lane pattern development plans and how they're affecting our athletes developing from the lowest levels all the way up through. And ultimately whether or not it's a good thing or a bad thing for a sport of bowling and what should be done about it. Many of the group were in favor of removing urethane from our tournaments along a certain timeline, but it was definitely not unanimous. Some people saw athlete development as a real problem, and other people of the group said, the kids today have more skills than anyone else, and using urethane is a skill. And I think we've seen that consistently throughout all the data collection, that there's definitely people on both sides of the fence on this argument.
In early 2025, USBC conducted a one-question survey with the intention to serve as a straw poll, an opportunity to gather consumer sentiment, generate discussion, and test how different segments of the bowling community would respond to potential changes. In that respect, the exercise accomplished its purpose by engaging more than 20,000 bowlers, sparking widespread dialogue, and confirming that the issue of urethane governance is both visible and meaningful to the marketplace. Segmented results showed that Open Championships bowlers were more likely than the general audience to support change, while certain smaller groups, such as PBA and PWBA participants, leaned toward maintaining urethane with tighter specifications.
All right, a lot of more great information there on in that video there about just how many people have been surveyed, talked to. Tom, when you guys were gathering data on this, not only what you were doing here at the lab, but you had to seek information from the industry stewards, the partners, non-partners, just the whole industry involved, bowlers from different segments, and that's what that really spoke to. So what did you guys learn? What's the big aha moment here from what you guys heard from the field?
Right. So, I mean, there's lots of things to take away from several different sources, right? We start with this working group of key, X-ball manufacturers, laymen, pro shop operators, right? We get them all in the room to get the ideas flowing, right? To get some direction going. Then we involve the manufacturers with comment letters. Hey, we're thinking about this or that. What do you think? We get them involved. We're talking to all the partners throughout the whole process and kind of refining it, right? We're refining and refining. And of course, this time we actually included a survey to the membership, which is the first time we've done that as part of this research since I've been here. And it's all just data points of this. Who does it affect? Who doesn't affect? All the different voices. And I think I said it right in the video. There's people on both sides of the argument where, urethane is a skill that's developable, right? And if I would just add anything to what I said in the video, is like, but are we learning all the skills in the age of urethane? Are the youth learning how to do everything? Or are they just focusing on one thing?
I'll throw it over to Nick real quick. Can't you just develop a lane pattern that where they just can't use urethane and and this one here is going to be reactive, and you play this part of the lane. Can't you just do that? Isn't that your job?
It is my job, but it's a little harder than that. So I think it's the question about urethane in youth events is an interesting one. It's going to be really fun to see. At the junior gold specifically, they have one standard for qualifying, which is the 78D urethane ball. And when they go to the match play, no urethane's allowed. And so they'll be testing two different skill sets in qualifying and in the match play to crown a champion. So we'll get more into the lane pattern effects.
I know.
Later.
That was more tongue in cheek
I know.
for you, my friend.
Yeah.
Del Ballard had a good question in here, and we're reading through these questions as we go, and we're trying to answer all the questions. But Del, I think just made a mention here. We're not just calling out the superstar Hall of Famers of all time. I mentioned Walter, now I've mentioned Del. But we do take their input very greatly because they've seen a lot over the years. Not to date you guys. Sorry, I'll work on that. But Dell said, my only issue is qualifying with a certain ball caching and then not being able to use said ball. By not being able to use said ball in the finals, you're saying there is something wrong with said ball. Solve the problem. And I'm going to let Tom answer this, but from what I've gathered already and what I've read, and if you do look at everything, again, we had the qualifiers were already in place. You guys probably met too late. I'm just going to say it, that this decision, I don't know how you guys got to this decision process, but it would have been nice and less confusion possibly if this would have been rolled out, say June or something, so that these junior gold qualifiers wouldn't have already started. It could have shaped the rules differently. That's one man's opinion. The host of the show, independent contractor, don't work here. So that's one of the reasons why I believe that has happened. But I do also think it could be fun to conduct an event to see who the most complete bowler is by, instead of putting them on 3 different lane patterns where you're supposed to play one out, one in the track, and one deep inside angle fallback or whatever you have, depending on your rev rate. I think it would be interesting to have an event. I'm off on a tangent here, but where you would have one day of where you bowl with polyester, a day where you bowl with urethane. Everybody has to use the same type of surface, and then a reactive resin. That would make your job a lot easier on how to develop the lane pattern, because you're not going to have this coexistence of reactive resin and urethane, right? But that's for another day and another story. But I think junior gold this year, if you're looking at it glass half full and on the positive side, based off of everything that's happened and what we can't change, I do like the interesting point of during qualifying, there's going to be strategies involved on whether or not you use your urethane balls or not. And if you are going to use it, once you get rid of it, what are you going to put in play to replace that ball? Are you going to go back to using bowling balls that have less core and putting the pins closer to your positive axis point to try to control that reaction? Like what? And this is me, I'm not a pro shop guy, but I know all this lingo. It's going to be kind of fun to try to figure that out in that puzzle, which could, in glass half full guy, saying, you know what, that's going to make that junior bowler maybe even a little bit better between the ears, making the right guesses, which actually makes more of a complete bowler, which ultimately gets them more prepared for college bowling and then perhaps a career professionally. But Tom, I'll let you take it from here on this topic.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Yeah, I mean, what we're really seeing in the area of this tournament is we're seeing a lot of people coming from the field being like, how can you have different rules for 2 halves of the same competition? I think that feedback's common, and I think it's definitely worth addressing. So, the main thing we're talking about here is that the youth developing all the skills, and having it both ways like this allows them to use the urethane skills they developed, right? It's not putting that skill off to this thing you will never have again. It's allowing them to compete with those skills, but it's also allowing for them to have to show that they can adapt to using reactive, and they can adapt to this other level in order to become the champion at the highest level. There's also some other things where, tampering is an issue more with urethane balls than reactive. So this helps us make sure there's not tampering influence at the highest level to finish as well. Obviously, we're talking about field checks to find that stuff. There's a lot of balls at junior gold. Think about trying to test every one of them. We have to build the rules around something we can enforce and isolate those things altogether.
And to jump in from a lane pattern development standpoint, we develop patterns based off criteria for each event. And so now for junior gold, there's a section of the tournament that has criteria that has, 78 balls in play, and there's patterns that do not. And so from a lane pattern development standpoint, that allows me to be selective on what I'm going to put on the lanes. And just as a reference point, historically Junior Gold has bowled on 4 different patterns in qualifying, a different pattern for advancers round, a different pattern for final advancers, a different pattern for match play, a different pattern for TV. So they're getting 8 different patterns they're being tested on.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're being tested on it in 2 different environments of equipment, which again, Tom, to your point, I think just enhances the skill development of our young players.
And there's positives. I mean, there's, I think we kind of pitch this one on a positive poly standpoint here. There's the negative Nancy side as well as, oh, well, now I have to travel with more bowling balls. Okay. And I'm flying to the event. So, I mean, we're not going to just sit here and just say, hey, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. But there is a very positive way to look at this that can be interesting and intriguing for our sport. Definitely when it comes to Junior Gold. Coming up next, we get more into how urethane affects developing lane patterns and where we're at today when it comes to trying to create lane patterns to give a fair and equal chance to left-handers, right-handers, different rev rates, and all those sorts of things. Let's take a look at this part from the video.
Veteran USBC pattern designer Nick Hoagland has identified the following key challenges in delivering equitable lane patterns in today's competitive environment.
When I was asked to provide feedback on the issues related to developing lane patterns in today's modern environment, where we have urethane and reactive resin balls being used simultaneously, here are the factors I identified. Lane surfaces are aging rapidly. Bowling ball technology continues to evolve at a rapid pace. The maximum allowable oil volumes are already being applied per lane. Increased revolution rates are prevalent across the entire competitive field. Urethane balls do rapidly degrade intended pattern characteristics. High-level bowlers are increasingly becoming specialists rather than generalists. These historical multi-angle trees are no longer providing consistent results, and as an industry, we're nearing the limits of viable oil pattern tricks to achieve balance.
Over the last decade, USBC has implemented various strategies to address these challenges, supplemented by similar efforts from other organizations, which have included oil pattern design adjustments such as the following: placement of oil speed bumps down the lane to maintain lane integrity, larger left side offsets to balance left-right equity, wet-dry pattern configurations to discourage urethane use, radical pattern structures designed to promote equity across playing styles, and tournament format and structure adjustments, such as reducing the number of games per block, eliminating burn squads to limit extreme transition effects, implementing hardness rules for certain competitions, and restricting urethane balls from being used for strike shots in select events. Despite these measures, nuances like left versus right-handed play and differences between one-handed and two-handed styles continue to complicate competitive balance. When asked what would change if urethane were removed, Hoagland identified the following potential benefits.
Shorter patterns could be used without compromising integrity and design intent. Shorter patterns could be applied to a wider range of events. Increased flexibility in pattern design at elite levels. Greater ease in creating successful patterns at the local level. Urethane specialists would adapt their scoring methods, and left and right-handed players would be able to play the lanes in a more similar manner.
All right, welcome back into the studio here. I'm here with Nick, and I'm here with Tom as well. Nick is the expert here, but I want to throw it to Tom first. After going over, and I'm putting you right on the spot here, but seeing how lane conditions, how hard Nick's job is now with the urethane bowling balls going down the lane, with the oil absorption not happening, the oil's on the ball, it's maneuvering it around. How do you feel how hard this man's job is now to be able to put out a fair and equitable condition for everyone?
I feel like it's impossible because it changes as soon as practice starts. Like, these things are going down the lane, sanded and who knows what, doing different qualities to the lane condition, and when people are going to jump across however many pairs of that traffic, it's something that's not only very hard to predict, it's something that's very hard to recreate in any other setting.
Yeah, when you talk about, oil absorption, and we really haven't gotten into that in today's show, but it's in the video. You know, I know from speaking with some of you folks here over the years that, you've got this 90 minute oil absorption rule moving forward, right? It's 90 minutes.
Right. So we're now going to be classifying balls as either, slow oil absorbing bowling balls, which are balls whose model averages over 90 minutes, right? Anytime we build a line, we got to build it somewhere. This is an average for the ball model, and it's really to separate balls that absorb oil and balls that absorb it really, really, really slowly. A ball like a urethane ball you might have in your bag, it might have oil on it for days before it looks like it's gone. So 90 minutes is just a threshold that minimally impacts slow reactives, but was really isolating those doesn't absorb for days balls out of the environment.
Right. And what I understand is a reactive ball typically is under 60 minutes.
So, I mean, I'd say a lot of them are under 60 minutes. Almost all of them are under 90 minutes. But some of them are as fast as 3 minutes.
3 minutes.
So there's very big differences in them.
So a reactive bowling ball can take in the oil and it's gone. It evaporates. You put the oil on the ball, 3 minutes later, it could be gone on some.
Right. Oil doesn't evaporate very fastly. I just set it on the counter and wait, but it'd be there for a very long time if you did. It soaks into the ball, right? And when we say 3 minutes, it's our standard operating procedure in the lab, which is a precision meter pump that puts out the same size drop. We do 3 drops in every color of the bowling ball, and we report the ball's fastest color. Why does the color matter? Things like the pigmentation and the ratio of mixture to get the color blend they're looking at can affect the oil absorption rate. So that's why we test every color in the ball. The final result of an oil absorption test is the average of the 3 drops in the fastest color.
Nick, you're probably wondering where I'm going with this, but I'm getting to a question in a second, like in A Few Good Men here. Okay. We need to get to the question, Mr. Caffey. Okay. Well, the reason why I say this is imagine your bowling league and you've got your reactive bowling ball, right? And you throw your shot, you're in a 5-man league and you're using Mr. Ball that absorbs the oil in 3 minutes. Before you throw your next shot, that oil is gone off of the ball. Is that what you're telling me?
Right. We actually see that track rings tend to absorb a little bit faster than our oil absorption drops from the pump do. So, but yes, the answer is yes.
Not all balls. We're just talking about this one in particular that you mentioned that you've seen. But then let's just say I'm bowling with a urethane bowling ball, right? And I throw my bowling ball, okay? And let's say there's a power outage in the bowling center, okay? And we can't resume our league for 5 days from now. There's a possibility when I go to throw that ball down the lane the next time that there's still some oil left on the outside part of that ball.
I mean, I think you see it on some of these urethane balls just when you open up your bag for next week a league that's still got oil on it.
So it's that stays on the ball, that it doesn't soak into the ball. It actually stays on the ball. And then if you don't wipe it before your next shot, or even if you do wipe it, you're going to get some off, but not all off. And that's what changes the shape of the pattern. I want to say down lane, but even more than down lane, that's not even fair at this point. And I think that's what leads to your comment of it's impossible to try to do that job that Nick has.
Right. I think people will navigate to, flare, right? A ball that flares and a ball that doesn't. A ball that doesn't flare at all picks up a ring of oil and lays it back down after the pattern, right? So that's one way to achieve carry down. But when you have flaring balls of both types and you towel off a reactive ball, what are you doing? Well, the towel's taking some and it's spreading the rest. And when you spread it really thin, it goes in almost immediately, right? There's barely any oil. It absorbs it really fast.
Okay.
But when you towel a urethane ball that doesn't absorb oil, you're just making this thin film of oil all the way around the ball. And that interacts with, the belts and the ball returns and anything. It's just spreading it all over the ball. So now whether it's flaring or not, it's slimy, right? You see them shine up. You see them get slimy, we say. And that slime is still impacting the carry down, even on a flaring urethane ball.
And this is the reason why we've seen in many high-end competitions across the board, we've seen over the years an increase in checking in 4 or 5 urethane balls for an event when maybe you have a limited arsenal, but you know what? I need fresh covers. I need to be able to use a ball for a couple games and then go right into the exact same ball with a fresh cover.
Right. And whether you want to make the argument about oil on the ball or lane shine or what have you, people tend to like that predictability of having the fresh one.
Okay. Well, Nick, now finally to you after we got that information there from Tom. So when you try to develop a lane pattern, let's just go there first with urethane bowling balls compared to when it was just reactives. How much more difficult is that for you? And then what happens? How does that change your job? And how can you possibly do what Mr. Tom says is impossible? How can you Tom Cruise it and take care of Mission Impossible?
Well, I find oil pattern development a fascinating blend of science and preparation and art. And so before we do any patterns, we always take stock of what are the goals of the tournament. Scoring pace, left, right equity. These are things that are really important to us. Rev rate, and make sure the patterns are, quote, fair for one-handed players, two-handed players. Throwing in the urethane reactive discussion while they're on the lane at the same time has been increasingly difficult. The net result of this, to cut to the chase, which is in the report, is the ability to run what I call a standardized Christmas tree, which we've been very familiar with over the last 25 years. And the ability to run those Christmas tree patterns at a short distance is becoming increasingly difficult for the reasons that you just outlined. When the patterns are short, people need controllable ball reaction. They tend to go to the urethane balls, and that pushes the oil down the lane, okay, more quickly than with reactive. Take into account that our lane surfaces have aged rapidly, that the manufactured hardness of bowling balls has dropped 6 points on average over the last 20 years. So it's more contact. The rev rates of the players are higher, right? And you get this scenario where we now have to put 35 milliliters of oil in the lane and can barely keep right-handers from lofting the cap at the Masters with the burn squad. And so you try to go short with the pattern, and you have all this volume, and you see this increased carry down. And the effect of that, generally speaking, is creating these much broader left to right offsets, which inherently just don't look right on the graph. And so to me, it's not a urethane problem. It's the existence of the urethane technology with the reactive technology at the highest levels, which creates this paradigm of creating radical pattern designs. And so that's what we've chosen to do over the last 4 or 5 years to help combat that.
According to one of our comments, I have it written down here. Carnival patterns is what you like to create.
Yeah, it's fine. I take it. I love this sport. I love consulting for USBC. I'm a bowler. I bowled in youth leagues and collegiate. I probably could have went on tour, but Chris Barnes is going to beat me then. He'll beat me now. But I serve the sport today because I think I'm making a difference with the patterns we're putting out to provide fair and equitable competition. And whether it looks like a Christmas tree or a Tetris pattern, we're looking at results. We're a results-based organization here. And so I can point to, failures that patterns have had over the years, but there are a lot more successes. And so I don't mind the comments. I just think we just keep doing our job and trying to put a competitive product out there for our customers to bowl on.
I think it's also a good reminder that when Nick designs a pattern, at times the graph may look different than what you're used to seeing. But when you really think about where the oil's being applied to the brush of the lane machine, you're actually just trying to accomplish something based off of everything that we've been talking about here today, to be able to get multiple styles to be there. And you don't mind urethane being used, right?
Oh.
You just don't want it to affect the things that you talked about that were most important, which was left and right equality as best as you can, which again would probably be an impossible job for somebody to say, but you do the best that you can with that. You don't want the top 8 to all be left-handed, and you don't
or
want,
right-handed,
or right, exactly, or you don't want where the lefties are shut out, or you go into a pattern 4. I've seen at the U.S. Open the last few years, and I'll say it, when you get into the pattern 4, lefties just drop like a rock. And you don't want that.
No.
You want, what is the ideal intent behind it? I'm getting off on a tangent again here, but in a professional event at the highest level for a major that USBC ran, what is the goal? What are you looking for at a top 24?
Well, take a step back at the U.S. Open specifically. The concept is called 3 angles to win. And that stems from the history of the U.S. Open back into the 1970s, where 3 squads of bowling, 1 on fresh, 1 on a burn, and 1 on a double burn. And by the time you got to that C squad, you were playing very deep. We do that today through re-oiling every squad, but by the patterns we design. So we want a pattern that typically plays out, a pattern that plays the track, and a pattern that plays in. Okay, so that's the goal. The fourth pattern is the tricky one because that's where most of the games are bowled. And so for this year at the
tournament, right?
more than half the tournament.
Yeah, okay.
For this year at the US Open, although the graph looked a little different, the goal was let's let every bowling ball be at the same place at the break point on the both left and right side of the lane. The only way to truly accomplish that is to force people to throw the ball in a certain spot. That is the opposite of a tree pattern. So we're telling people the dry boards are on the 9th and 10th board. You have to throw it here, whether you're a lefty, a righty, a one-hander, a two-hander, you throw urethane, you throw reactive, you throw it overhand, it doesn't matter. Your ball's got to hit this spot if you want to win the tournament. To me, that's success, is having folks that are playing the same game on the lane. And so I'm proud of the work that we did with that tournament specifically. But each tournament, Mike, has its own goal, but the US Open's one probably most people would relate to.
Well, yeah, I think in our sport it's actually backwards. I think the Masters is the U.S. Open, and the U.S. Open is the Masters if you compare it to golf, right? I think the U.S. Open, just one man's opinion, is the most prestigious event. Now, one thing I do want to ask you about when it comes to this, again, kind of putting you on the spot here, but you talk about multiple styles. The goal is to have multiple styles. What about somebody out there who has owned their craft to become a very power player? That's a skill. That's a skill to rotate and get spin axis on a bowling ball, as opposed to somebody, and no offense to those that bowl it like this, but a second arrow burglar or a dump doctor, right?
Right.
Eight revolutions as opposed to however many revolutions you can put on a ball. I don't know what it is to go down the lane. Is it fair to say we want a dump doctor to be able to make the top 24 as well? Or how do you guys kind of take that into play when it comes to different styles?
I think it's a level up from that. It's in trying to ensure that all styles have a place in the championship, whether it's the Open Championship or the U.S. Open. The U.S. Open, again, is the easiest one because we can say, hey, the dump doctor, the second arrow, that's going to play on this pattern, and that's the intent, right? But you're going to have to play the fifth arrow on this pattern and the gutter on this pattern. And if you're only good at the second arrow, then you're probably not going to make the cut. So I think it's a broader conversation of take all the variables, scoring pace, history, customer feedback, right? Mm-hmm. That's important. And then take all those constraints, put them into a pattern. And at some point, someone's got to make a decision. And that's me today as steward of the Lane Pattern Development Program. And years later, it's going to be somebody else.
Yeah, definitely. You also talked about in that video, you covered a lot of things there that are creating challenges for yourself. One of them is the lane surface aging. Mm-hmm. I said this the other day somewhere, don't remember where it was, but I don't remember ever hearing like the fronts are like glass and it just glides through the front part of the lane. I don't know if there's a bowling center I don't care how new your lane install is, the fronts always hook. I mean, it's almost like it's like a broken record. So it's
the ongoing joke on tour for 40 years. Correct.
Yeah.
So the history of the lane surface, why I mentioned that they're aging is because in the late 90s and early 2000s, proprietors were transitioning from wood and Guardian or first generation synthetics to second. There's a lot of installs there at that time. I remember on the PBA tour in 2001, I believe 5 out of the 10 centers in the first half of the year had just put new lanes in. And so all of those lane surfaces today are 25 years old, which is at the end of their useful life, right? Depending on the lineage of the center. And today, proprietors are spending money on other things more than just lanes. There's other facets of their business. So these lanes are aging rapidly. They may be leveled, right? They may have depressions in them. They're passing spec. They may be gold standard, but the scratches, the wear and tear for 25 years of bowling makes us put more oil on the lane than we did 25 years ago. 25 years ago on the PBA tour, we could oil 25 mils and I'd be safe on probably a burn squad. Today, if you put 25 mils out, the right-handers with power would be at the left gutter probably after 6 games. And so the environment is just changing. We can't go back to the old way of doing things. We have to look forward.
I'm going to throw it over to Tom here. You've been listening to Nick talk about a lot of these things, and you're very aware of all the lane stuff as well. But, this is Nick's forte. You have anything to add to this discussion that sticks out for you?
Regarding, how the lanes break down, it's just a challenge to study that with one robot that fires a shot every 60 seconds, right? amount of bowling that happens quickly in this pattern breakdown scenario is an interesting problem that it's just hard to study. So we try these things and we get results and we follow the results, like Nick said, and we keep trying to look to the future. So yeah.
Mike, the one thing I can add here before anyone gets to the questions, but we take an approach, I call it, of the old school days of the PBA with Len Nicholson. I mean, I visited 22 sites last year doing pattern testing on site before anyone gets there. And at the Masters and the US Open, we have ball testers come in, sign non-disclosure agreements, and they're practicing on test patterns so we can actually see the ball go down the lane. So there's a huge investment here that the USBC's made in this program. And so I don't think we talk about that enough, but there is a lot of work that goes into making sure these patterns come out. The reason why pattern 4 looks like the Tetris graph, there's a good reason for that. It wasn't just throwing a dart at the wheel. So I'm happy to take any questions people have about pattern development, because I could sit here and talk about it all day.
Okay, so I'm going to just ask one general question for you. What goes into making a lane pattern? I know that's a very broad general question, but let's talk about it at a high level event.
Yep.
We already talked about kind of what your goals are, but then how do you say, I'm going to sit down with the Kegel-Kazi program, which is the program that you build a lane pattern with. I know you test multiples, but what is it, some of these different things? Do you just come up with it yourself? Do you look and see what's happening around the world? Have you watched scoring page? What is it that you do?
First of all, there's no AI yet for pattern development, although
I wish we had a soundboard around here.
No, for me, I'm a student of it. So I don't think that my patterns are better. So, I watch what Kegel's putting out in the lanes. I watch what the PBA's been putting out in the lanes. There's a good pattern's like a song. If it's got a good riff, then you may use elements of it in your own designs, right? And so I'm very conscious of that. Jason I don't know if he has the slide or not. I presented my US Open graph is a handwritten piece of paper with 15 concepts on it. I have names for them. So the dry track strips, the out of bounds, the hooky gutter, like these are all the concepts of different types of patterns, right? And so you start with that as sort of like your riff. I'm going to do this pattern's got the gutter hooks. And then I go into it and go, oh, okay, we're bowling on an HPL, so they're going to hook more. We're bowling at the US Open. Oh, we bowled on this type of pattern 5 years ago. All of those elements go into what we're going to put out as a finished product. And then where's it going to go in the schedule? Is it second? Is it fourth? All those things kind of go into it. So you take the science of the X's and O's and the Kazi, and you marry it with sort of the art of the bowling center and the event and get to that. Sorry, it wasn't a better answer, but it's not a AI driven X equals Y. It's very much an art form.
Do you always have to reinvent patterns, or do you take things that have worked in the past in certain bowling centers and you bring it back, or it appears over here on a PWBA tour, and then there it is at Junior Gold, and then 3 years later we see it as one of the patterns at the US Open?
I would refer to that as auditioning the patterns. So like this year's Masters pattern, which was that hourglass shape, that had been used on the women's tour. It had been used at ITCs twice. So that pattern had been in production for probably 8 or 9 years.
Okay.
Before we put it out at the USBC Masters. So any of these newer designs that are a little more non-traditional, they go through batch testing. They might be put out at the Hoosier Classic. You never know where they're going to be. And then they, when it's their right time to come out based on the variables of the tournament, then make the decision to do it. You can't play it safe all the time with this stuff, with the pattern development. You got to roll the dice sometimes.
And we are going to get to questions, but you've also got things too that are coming your way. Oh, it looks like we got that up on the screen there.
Yeah, it's not fancy, but literally I started with 24 patterns for the US Open, and I believe this was the second version. I had it whittled down to 15. This is after 2 pattern testing sessions myself that I did at Woodland after Kegel sent the machines in. And then the third pattern session is when we get to the final ones where I bring other testers in. So it's about 50 or 60 hours of work, or 40, 50 hours of work just into the US Open pattern development.
Yeah. And then let's take where I was going to go next was let's take your the advancements at Kegel, which is the official lane maintenance supplier of the United States Bowling Congress. I believe I've heard that somewhere. They do a great job of developing products and patterns. And this new Atlas machine, these new types of oils, you used a new oil at the Open Championships. Glide, I believe, was the name of the thing. But as all those things start to come into fruition, it gives you more ability to fine tune these patterns. Can you talk a bit about just kind of the evolution of the lane machine and how that's kind of worked with how you develop these patterns as well?
Yeah. So when new technology comes out, we want to be at the forefront of using it responsibly. And so the Kegel Atlas machine has given more tools in the toolkit, so to speak. So the newer design patterns that we did, including the one at the US Open, are specifically for that machine that was designed. With new oils, they have a new product coming out that we've used and was tested and approved at USBC. I love the product. I think it'll be great. And so whatever innovations they have, we want to be at the forefront of using. If they think it's great enough for their customers, then we want to test it, verify it, and then we'll use it for our customers.
But because this is a show about urethane, you are
Yeah.
finding it harder and harder to develop patterns to achieve the goals that you want by urethane bowling balls going down the lane.
While they're trying to exist on the same lane with reactive balls. That's the key. Yeah, them together on the same lane surface makes it the fourth dimension of pattern development.
But you would feel much more comfortable if a tournament just had urethane only. You think your job would be easier?
I think it's a simpler solution if it's just urethane or just reactive. It's when they're both together that really makes it diabolical.
It creates havoc. And how
Yeah.
many years have you been dealing with this problem?
Urethane problem?
Yeah.
Not a problem, but it's probably the last. The coexistence really started in 2018 or 19, and the ball testing, field tested, started in 20. And I went back through the data. That's really where I started to see the uptick of it, to where we're at today, where if you're running a shorter pattern at 40, 39 feet, probably most or all the entire field is going to transition to urethane quickly.
And if you had an instance at an event, I know we're getting into podcast stage here where we're just having a conversation, just shooting it here, but if you had an instance where you thought something was going to work out really well and then the urethane made everything a problem?
No, I don't think so. I just think in general in pattern design, you think one thing's going to happen, you intend for one thing to happen, but bowlers are humans and they make adjustments based off things all the time. And so I'm not surprised ever when something doesn't go the way it was planned.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's been the consensus with
Yeah.
any lane man I've
Mhm.
ever talked to, by the way. Everybody, that is something consistent that we get. Tom, anything else you'd like to add to this lane conditioning discussion that we just came out of?
No, I think lane conditions is something that gives our sport variety, right? It's what makes our lanes that all look the same play differently. So what Nick's able to do to get different shots and patterns, I find very impressive. There's a lot to it, but it's what gives our game the variety of different, different courses, if you will. Even though they all look the same on the outside, they play quite a bit differently.
One man's opinion here, just coming from me, from the heart here, just over the years, we've seen our scoring system needs to change, right? Nobody understands our scoring system. So the only way we can get into the Olympics is if we change our scoring system. Well, our scoring system, in my opinion, is one of the greatest things about our game, right? It's unique, and in today's world, what gets all the clicks, what gets all the hits on TikTok or whatever, it's uniqueness. It's people and sports and things that are different, right? You can't see the oil on the lane. I know that the PBA has done a magnificent job of trying to educate the audience with red and blue oils. I mean, I commend them for that. Wherever you're at on that, so be it. I think it was a step forward. But in a normal bowling center, you can't even see what the obstacles are, like in a golf course. And I know I'm talking something that's been talked about for years. I'm not saying anything new, but every once in a while, I think it's okay to embrace who we are, what we are, and the uniqueness of what we are. Why does it always have to be so simple? I think of simple as a white wall and you feel like you're in a concrete building, and that's no fun at all. You feel very boxed in and industrial, right? I think of Tupperware. Tupperware is about the most boring product in the world, but they sell a ton of it, right? No, I'd rather be a television. I'd rather have, I'd rather be at I'm not a Grateful Dead fan, but you know where I'm going with tie-dye type stuff, I think I think we are a complicated sport, and I think there's a lot of moving parts within our sport, and I think we should embrace that once in a while. Just one personal opinion instead of trying to want to change everything. Again, I'm not an expert when it comes to how we get bowling into the Olympics or any of these sorts of things. It's just my opinion, and I know a lot of people have opinions about this topic, so it's a great transition into being able to answer some questions. And it's been a while since I've been able to do this, but there were some questions that were submitted ahead of time. And I've got one here that I kind of highlighted, and I guess we'll all just openly discuss this, and we'll talk about it as best as we can. And this is how do the rule changes align with USBC's stated vision and expanding the sport among youth and increasing participation at the grassroots level.
Right. I think what you really take from the changes at the grassroots levels is nothing changes. Right. These are changes for the high end tournaments. It's encouraging the development of multiple kinds of skills, but we're not changing leagues and local events. We're focusing a minimal impact change on where it's most important.
So meaning league play, you can still use all these bowling balls.
Correct.
Unless your league has a rule stating otherwise.
Correct, which they could always do.
Right, and that's always been the case.
Correct.
A rule, and that's not just new to today. That's all time.
Correct.
Next question: what metrics will USBC track to ensure that these new rules do not inadvertently slow down youth recruitment or retention in the sport?
Yeah, I mean, that question.
It's a tough one. Yeah,
Youth
because it's
retention and
subjective.
participation in the sport is not up to this building. It's up to what the centers offer and what the locals offer to get the kids in. And we'll never be fully in control of that one from here. All we can do is arm our associations with the knowledge and the information to set up good programs. What are we doing as a national governing body for that? We're starting a whole nother program with field service reps, which I'm not the expert on, but they're going to get out there and help bowling centers develop these types of plans. Moving forward, we want to see more youth. There's areas doing that, but I'm probably not the right person to answer that one.
Right. Yeah, I kind of figured that, and I appreciate you taking the question, though, man. Again, also, I needed to state this. I think if you have a question as a USBC member that you want an answer to, this campus is wide open and is always here to answer your questions. They want to answer your questions. That's why they have experts here to answer them. So do not hesitate to pick up the phone and call the office, or you can also email in, right? And what's that email address? I don't know if we're going to pop that up on the screen or not here, but forgive me for not knowing that ahead of time. But I know that you can always email in here and talk to. I mean, you can actually get somebody on the phone when you USBC sanction your events or your leagues. If you call in here, you have a question, they'll be happy to answer anything, right? And you guys do that too.
Absolutely. Anything about equipment specs, my team will take you care of.
Hey, Jason, can you put that question back on? I think there was one from Brittany Brown we wanted to get to. And I think this probably is more talking about the collegiate and the junior gold. We haven't spent much time on the collegiate. Part of the reason for the effective rules for in the collegiate space is the season has already started. I know I'm running a tournament in 3 weeks in Detroit, and so schools have bought equipment, made investments, and so there's no change to that regulation until we get to the nationals ITCs in April in Green Bay, and at that time it's at the higher level, it's more easily defined, more easily regulated, and then the new rules will go in effect then. So I think that's an important one because we didn't talk much about that.
Yeah, good point.
Second point, I've seen some, and please keep the chat comments coming. There seems to be some questions or points about a comment I made about topography left and right. I think it's related to the U.S. Open. I want to make sure I clarify that. I'm not saying that topography is different or the same on the left and right sides of the lane. What I'm saying is in the U.S. Open, the goal was to get the bowlers to play the same part of the lane through using the oil pattern, which was accomplished. Everyone had to get their ball to the same break point, whether you were left or right-hander. So if I misspoke there, I apologize.
Okay. By the way, real quick, shout out to JT. He's producing our program today. This is his show. For him to say, hey, Mike, can you come in and run this show today? I appreciate that. And you guys should all subscribe to the Sport of Bowling show on YouTube. He does a great job putting these things together. There's a lot of great information in there. And I love watching them. I just wish they got a few more views. So check out the Sport of Bowling show besides just this one here. I want to try to stay on topic. We're getting a few off-topic questions. JT, have you seen any other ones that you want to pop up here in particular? Help me out a little bit. Here we go. The objective is to knock down 10 pins. USBC has no right to judge what is a good way to accomplish that objective. Limits creativity and does more to harm the integrity of the game. Boy, I could take that in a couple different directions. But Tom, do you want to try this one?
Right. So this concept that we are limiting options. What we're trying to accomplish here is to build environments where the intent is held up, to build environments where these multiple styles can play. So I just don't think we're really on topic with the question that we're trying to limit ways to knock down 10 pins versus we're trying to set up our events in a way that makes sense in the terms of pattern development, athlete development, that sort of thing.
Yeah, when I interpret that question, I kind of see it as USBC is trying to limit creativity. Actually, I see this, and this is not being a homer here by any means. This is actually trying to expand creativity, because what I've seen at the highest levels, I'm not talking about at your leagues. And if you're a league player and you don't bowl at any of these high levels, you're not affected at all. You can still have an opinion about how it affects the people that actually bowl for a living, how this affects their livelihood. But what I see here is when urethane starts going down the lane, everybody has to go to it, and that particular ball is dictating where you're playing on the lanes, which that limits creativity more than anything else. I think. I don't know what you think, Nick.
I think it all ties back to skill development as well with our youth athletes. One of the comments I put in my section is seeing more and more bowlers, competitive bowlers, high level bowlers are being specialists and not generalists. And that, to me, that means that they're not using the full range of their potential skill set. Part of that skill set is urethane. Part of that skill set's playing the fourth arrow or playing the gutter. So I think we keep in a lens, especially in the youth tournaments, regarding the goals of the organization, the ladder, so to speak. If you're a bowler at junior gold, are you aspiring to be on the Queen's telecast? Well, the Queen's telecast today, moving forward, will not have urethane. And so I think we have to keep that in mind. It's a progression of a development ladder.
This is nothing more, again, than an opinion here, and I like to state that ahead of time, because this is a professional show and this is a hot topic. But I mean, I've been around bowling forever, right? Whenever I used to sit there and say, hey, let's see who made the telecast this week, right? I knew if Kelly Kaufman made the show, okay, and I'm dating myself, or we can use Chris Prather today. If I would get excited about Chris Prather playing the show, I know he's going to have a little bit softer ball speed, and I know Prather's probably going to be left of almost everybody, and he's going to be doing that trick that he does, and I'm excited to tune in for this broadcast. Like, I'm pumped about Chris Prather making this show. If I turn that thing on and Prather is throwing urethane up 10 because everybody else is, and again, this is just being a fan of the game. This has nothing to do with what gets the job done, or who's Mike Flanagan to determine that Chris Prather should be playing here or there. But I want to be able to see an event where I get to see the players do what they do best and have an opportunity to try to perform at the highest level. I'd love to see Walter versus Prather, and Walter Walter was great at playing inside back in the day. I want to note that that's how he got to the show. But we all know Walter red ball up 5, right? Is the bowling jargon. But wouldn't you love to see Prather playing 20, hooking the whole lane, and Walter and those two just going at it out on the lanes, right? But I've seen in recent years, not all the time, these shows that develop into everybody's throwing urethane and everybody's playing the same part of the lane, and really their style doesn't matter. I mean, I'm going to speak to this just because it's something that just happened like a month ago. But I was involved in a tournament in New Mexico called the New Mexico Open. Mike Fagan's the new proprietor there. The Mackeys have done a great job of putting that event on for many years. And I consulted with Nick on a lane pattern for that thing, and we put it at 47 feet. And we put a lot of oil down lane, and we put a lot of oil on the lane, like 36 mils. And I really thought with this particular pattern, it was going to allude to multiple styles being able to have an opportunity. In that event, there were a youth bowler that made it. There was a bowler over 60 years old, a bowler over 50 years old. There was a right-handed regular player. There was a left-handed regular player. There was a two-handed right-hander. There was a regular-handed right-hander. There were 2 females that made the top bracket as well. So I thought, bingo, this is amazing, right? Like this event is awesome. And because of the way that the pattern was developed, it wasn't necessarily, hey, you shouldn't use urethane, or we don't want you to use urethane. But I thought it would be quite difficult to be able to use a urethane bowling ball on this pattern. And the final match was Dallas Leong throwing Purple Hammer outside. Don't have any problem with that, against Anthony Simonson using a different, he was using everything, right? That's what Simon does. He's got the bag of tricks. But it was those were the styles that were in the finals. And I was pretty shocked to see a urethane ball being used on 47 feet with a big speed bump down lane, and that got the job done. But you know what? On that day, Dallas was the best bowler. He was the one that was repeating his shots the best, and he deserved to win the tournament. It's just interesting when you try to do something and how things work out. So,
yeah, I mean, I think everyone says when the oil's short, the urethane comes out. But we had lane pattern experts tell us in the room of the working group that I put out a 55-foot pattern and expected urethane to be out of play, and they still used it. So it's not something you can just have a recipe. This recipe equals no urethane. That recipe doesn't exist.
And I think that the conversation is it's the existence of both of those technologies on the lane at the same time that creates the difficulty in creating equitable environments across the tournaments. That's really the point.
Finally, check my private chat here. JT let us know it was bowlinfo@bowl.com. If you ever have any questions, 7 minutes late on that one. My bad. Do we have any other questions, JT, that we want to pop up here on the screen or anything in particular before we conclude things here today? I do want to thank everybody for tuning in today. We're not going off the air quite yet, but remember the folks here at USBC are more than happy to answer any of your questions that you may have that may drill down more into what you're looking for here. It's been an honor to be able to sit here and talk with these guys about this topic, and I appreciate them bringing me out here. This is a very hot topic in bowling. And again, as I mentioned on the open, it's okay to agree and disagree with some of these rules. I mean, if this affected me in a way that I couldn't make a living as well, and it takes away an advantage of mine, I wouldn't be too happy about it. That's for sure. Let's see. Still confused. Is the problem the ball or the oil? Lots of talk about the oil, but not the balls.
From the lane pattern development standpoint, it's the existence of the balls on the lane with the oil. It's all of it together. So for the reasons that we talked about earlier, creating equitable competitions with these two pieces of technology on the same lane surface, with the age of the lane surface, with the rev rates of today's players, and with the volumes of oil we're putting on the lane, is leading us into what I would call radical pattern designs. And so that's the conflict that we have with having both pieces of technology on the lane at the same time, especially at the highest levels of competition.
Right. The problem is we're dealing with two types of bowling balls, fast absorbing balls and slow absorbing balls, and they both transition the patterns differently and they interact with the lane pattern differently. So the problem's not a bowling ball. The problem is a type of bowling ball versus another, and them both influencing the pattern in opposite directions in some cases.
Okay. We did have a question here. Why was there no change to Team USA trials?
That's a great question, and it's a very simple answer is that we're having our team try out in the same environment that IBF is going to conduct the international events. So, IBF is going to be able to make their own determinations after our announcement. We'll stay tuned to those, but right now team trials is in the format we're expecting international competitions to continue in.
So basically you want the training ground for Team USA to be the same as what they're going to be competing in internationally.
Yeah,
competition.
Exactly.
And from a pattern development standpoint, then nothing in that process will change for 2026's tournament.
Okay. If anybody has any last minute questions, we are looking at them on the screen here. If your question was asked a long time ago and it was something that we didn't get to because we were busy covering what we needed to, now is the time to throw those in here, and we'll give a few minutes on that one. So if IBF changes, then team trials may change. I don't know how you can make a robust decision like that right away.
The intent is for them to compete in the same grounds. I can't say if something will or won't change.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Let's see. See if there's anything else coming in here. Let's see this one here. Banning urethane doesn't level the playing field. Being a good bowler levels the playing field. People would rather complain about something than get better. It's an opinion.
It sounds like a pretty strong opinion, and I would say that we didn't ban urethane.
Yeah, depending on what you're competing in, right?
Correct. Yeah, I mean it's each event is unique, and at the events that have been described in the document, and to the point we spoke about earlier, go bowl with those same bowling balls in tonight in league that you did before the announcement. So you're good to go. If you are going to bowl in an elevated competition, such as the Open Championships or Women's Championships, then there are new bowling ball requirements. And I think the tournament managers and directors, if they've not already sent those out, will send those out to participants. So everyone knows exactly what the rules are, to remind them, and then also to check that approved ball list before you compete in a tournament.
Yeah, JT, the Katie Kretz one, I did answer right off the bat. That was the first one that I had. So, Katie, I think we got the most of your questions there. We can put up this Mike McNeely one here. It's pretty lengthy. It is going to fit on the screen. Okay. I'm getting here late, so I apologize if this has been answered. I'm confused about the timing of the announcement. It seems that the announcement was made after USBC took the sanction fees from the vast majority of the bowlers. It appears as a bait and switch. Pay to compete under one set of rules, and then they were changed almost instantly. Why not make the announcement before collection or enforce these rules starting in 2026 fall winter league season? Okay, Michael. All right, buddy. I don't know. JT can't zoom in on me, but that's okay. I don't need to be zoomed in on. Michael, you mentioned fall and winter league season. You can still use all of these bowling balls in your fall and winter leagues unless there is a rule inside of your league that your league voted on that says you can't. If you are a league bowler, you can continue to use every ball that is manufactured. I'll also state again, I think we said this earlier, that the Purple Hammer has been legal and is still legal with USBC specifications. It is a ball that is produced, so is the Pitch Black and whatever other balls. I hope I'm not missing any other ones, but those balls are USBC approved, legal. They're not being banned. They can still be for sale in your local pro shop, and you can use them in league.
Correct.
Okay, so I think we covered that one. What's the difference between how urethane breaks down a pattern compared to a strong reactive ball with 360, 500 grit sandblasted on it? Sorry for laughing. What's the difference? I got to read it again. What's the difference between how urethane breaks down a pattern compared to a strong reactive ball with 360, 500 grit sandblasted on it?
Tom, why don't you start with the science behind it? And then
I mean, we did some league simulation studies back when we took the balance holes away. We were doing the ball technology study. We've studied this, and we do know that rougher grits pull more oil, and we do know that reactive balls and urethane equipment or slow oil absorbing equipment impact the pattern differently. With the slow oil absorbing urethane style bowling balls, what they do is they tear up the heads, they get the oil up in the heads, and they deposit down lanes. You get more carry down. A reactive ball is flaring and absorbing oil. They tend to tear a line all the way down the pattern and deposit much less afterwards. So because they don't slime up and they absorb the oil in, there's less carry down, but they're flaring and they're taking oil off the whole line. So you break down more of the whole lane versus just the heads. And we have done studies that show rougher grits do take more oil off the lane.
So from a pattern standpoint, exactly true. What I think the best way to describe it is the urethane bowling equipment, slow oil absorption, especially the highest levels at the PBA, accelerates the pattern migration or the pattern depletion. So on a really short pattern, right-handed touring players or high-level bowlers are going to push that pattern, and it effectively will play 42 or 43 feet probably within a game on the right side of the lane because 85% of the traffic's going down there. Take that to the left side of the lane where only 15% of the traffic's going down. Their migration's a lot less. And so it goes back to balancing that. How do you balance the migration, the quicker migration of the oil on using urethane equipment on the right versus the left? That's where we're getting into these issues of fairness and complexity with these tree patterns. If not, you end up with graphs that look odd because you have to sort of absorb or count on what the right side is going to do. So again, it's the combination of both of those types of equipment online at the same time that really creates the challenge.
Another way to think of this too is from like a drastic standpoint is, I've called a lot of bowling on Bowl TV, and I've seen a lot of I've called action where you develop these patterns, Nick, and we watch these great athletes go down and start bowling on it, and they're using urethane bowling balls, and we say, you can go back and listen to it. All right, let's see what happens when this pattern stretches. Are they going to stay in urethane? Right. I mean, I'm just going to talk about Jesper Svensson for a minute. When they went to the 78 balls, okay, When Jesper went from pitch black to red IQ, which is this IQ 78, he many times, and I said this on the air, all right, Jesper, here we go. He's probably going to bowl about 750 for his first 3 games and then based off of who he follows, how many other lefties made it, then it determines his scoring average for the last 3 games of the block. Okay. And if there was a lot of traffic over there, or if he was hitting pairs where other urethane balls went down the lane, he left a lot of corner pins. This happened on a almost a regular basis. Now, Jesper Svensson is a tremendous talent, arguably the best left-hander we have right now. Sorry, Packy Hanrahan, Jacob Buttriff, Matt Russo, you name the rest of the lefties. I'm sure I forgot Graham Faw too, whoever, okay? But when this guy is bowling, he didn't change. He's sharp as a tack. I mean, he's being as accurate as can be. He's rotating. He's doing the 3 things. He's rotating the ball the same way. He's throwing at the exact same speed within reason. And he's hitting the same target in the front part of the lane and down part of the lane, especially the down part of the lane. How can he bowl 3 games consecutively and bowl 750 or 800, look like he's King Kong and he's crushing it? And then all of a sudden, because there's been oil squirt at the end of the lane, and I don't mean literally squirted with a squirt gun, but because the other ball's traveling down the lane has moved that oil down the lane. Now all of a sudden in his break point, his ball doesn't want to change direction, which means his entry angle into the pocket is not optimum. So now he's going to start to leave those corner pins. What can he go to? And that's the thing he has not been able to figure out. He has not been able to figure out what his next ball in his ball progression, because reactive isn't quite the answer. There's been some other balls that have been come out with from different manufacturers that are kind of this is the next step. We saw this urethane's gone. This is this. We've seen different things marketed, but they have yet to perfect that. And I think that's something the manufacturers are looking for right now.
Take that example on the left side of the lane where it's 3 games of a block and he's seeing that ball motion in the 4th game. There's 5 times more bowlers on the right side of the lane. They're seeing that progression in the first game. In the second game, it's stretching. They're moving. So again, they're playing 2 different games, 2 different sports at that point in time. I mean, one side of the lane's moving every 6 shots. The other side of the lane's moving every 3 games. You have to account for that at some point. The point is that the urethane on the lane with the reactive does that at an accelerated rate. There are more transitions, and it just becomes more and more difficult to try to get it fair and right.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, we said it earlier, but we know that reactive bowling balls with a lot of surface on them can also help make the heads hook more if everybody's setting it down in the same part of the lane, and that can also alter the way that a lane pattern is going. I've not read it yet, but if you can only have 5 balls on your ball card at Junior Gold, how does that affect when making match play? You are allowed to swap it out.
Right. It's great. It's just like the U.S. Open when the professionals go to match play. You can switch out your arsenal and replace the bowling balls.
I have a letter here to the Junior Gold community that I could read some highlights from. This letter was a follow-up to USBC's announcements about the national tournament rules for slow-absorbing oil-absorbing high-performance urethane bowling balls. We want to help clarify how it impacts Junior Gold. The local qualifying doesn't change. For the 2026 Junior Gold Championships in Minneapolis, there'll be different ball rules for urethane equipment in qualifying advancers round. Qualifying advancers round in Youth Open Championships, the only urethane bowling balls allowed will be 78D in hardness. So that does eliminate some balls like the Purple Hammer and the Storm Pitch Black. Those are not allowed in qualifying or advancer rounds, but they are in the local qualifying rounds because they've already taken place before these rules were put into place. And then in the match play in the finals, no urethane balls allowed. It also says that athletes will be allowed to change ball cards after qualifying and advancer rounds to add and remove balls before match play final rounds. As you want to hear some of the thinking behind it, USBC has a real concern about the future of athleticism in terms of skill development. I know some of you out there have been vocal about it's not up to the USBC to determine that, but from what they've seen, that's how they feel, and they hear feedback from the industry. Versatility at the highest levels will be needed to ensure a possibility of success in the future. Urethane ball increases every year at Junior Gold and is now predominant in the finals. We see youth bowlers becoming less versatile and more dependent on urethane bowling balls. We believe that this may hinder the athletes developing into the best athletes they can become. So, and USBC also believed that removing the urethane from Junior Gold Championships 26 was too drastic. Instead, this incremental move gives athletes time to adjust and keeps the urethane category part of the event because of the time allotment And also on the open, we talked about how much it can affect, people having to replace equipment. That's a big ask financially as well. But the tampering is also a concern, and USBC is also very compassionate as they understand that this is a major adjustment for the event and appreciate any support that the bowlers and the families can give them. So can you guys explain the difference between junior gold qualifying and sectionals, since it's basically the same thing when we can throw soft purple at sectionals, but junior gold is 78?
I think you just go right to the rule. I mean, for college bowling for this season, urethane bowling balls are not allowed at the 2026 USBC Intercollegiate Team and Singles in Green Bay. That is the only change. So the prior rules, including purple handlers and pitch blacks, are allowed throughout the entire regular season and at sectionals. That is different than junior gold, or as Mike alluded to earlier, there are a couple of different rules in the qualifier and the advancers and the final advancers round. So your first 6 blocks, for those of you above U12, the only urethane balls allowed will be 78D in hardness. The purple hammer and storm pitch black are not allowed. And once you get to that match play round, no urethane bowling balls are allowed. And so one of the primary reasons for the difference in collegiate versus junior gold is that the collegiate season is already starting upon us very quickly. Teams have purchased equipment. It's a little different dealing with the team atmosphere and buying it than in individuals. Also, some of the junior gold qualifiers have also started already this year. And to Tom's point earlier, I think high impact, minimal disruption and accomplishing this, the stair step of ladder of skill is important. So we made changes at the highest levels where the most impact is in crowning a champion.
Yeah, another thing that went out to the college coaches here, which talks a lot about what you just did, but the challenge for us here has been some of the issues that have come up within college bowling. The decision allows us to have confidence that those challenges are removed at the highest level of collegiate bowling, ITC and ISCs. But because the season has already started and many teams have already purchased equipment, did not want to disrupt regular season or sectionals qualifying. And then moving forward, USBC is going to have a discussion in collegiate with the college coaches and get feedback about rules for future seasons. We'll be looking to collaborate on the long-term approach and timing for equipment rule adjustments for future seasons. And again, please reach out if you have any questions. Follow up on the timing question. Why not delay the rule change for next year's junior gold season instead of different rules for various levels of qualification? I guess you guys could have done that.
Well, I think we considered it. The question is, a timeline. Should you wait? Should you not wait? You make a decision. And our decision was that this is important enough at that event that we want to apply this to change the next year.
And the decision-making process around here has to have approval by the board.
Right. We had board of directors meetings. So you do all the research, you put everything together. You have a board of directors meeting, right? Staff controls the tournament rules, but we've historically always gone to the board for blessings, right? So the tournament rules were blessed by the board of directors. The equipment changes to the manual are blessed by the equipment specifications committee, right? We do all the research, we present it to them, and they make the decisions.
Okay, research and the data drives it. All right, let's see. If you need a shorter version of my question, why not just measure hardness at the premier events? Durometers cost less than the machines that tested static weights. Static weights also could be tampered with on the fly and brought back. Nickels in the inserts, I guess.
Right. So, I mean, we're bringing back the durometers to key events. We're going to be doing research. We're going to be there testing on site. We think that's as important as well. We think there's lots of challenges with temperature and cleaning the equipment and everything else. There's lots of challenges there, but we find it'd be important, especially to catch potential tampering cases on site when it's detectable. So we'll be there with more durometers.
Yeah, I just think I think the most common question I got asked is that question, which is why wouldn't you for the U.S. Open and the Masters just do the PBA rule, which is just allow the 78 hardness balls. The interpretation in the public is, those balls will not get below 72 without tampering, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people forget that there is tampering involved, but why would you take a ball out of my bag based off of other people that are doing illegal things when this is something I want to use and the PBA has been using it for a couple of years. So why doesn't this make sense for your largest tournaments?
I think that's a great question. And the answer is because they told us to. We talked to the PBA Players Committee, and they wanted it fully removed from these events. So we did what they wanted.
So you guys don't just sit here and just come up with this stuff out of thin air. You guys actually...
We talk to people. We listen. Yes.
All right. Okay. Let's see. So would you think the problem would be people sandblasting their urethane, not the urethane ball itself, especially if they're using industrial sandpaper for deeper cuts in the cover stock? Boy, we got a true value question here. I wish they'd come back and sponsor the tour. Wouldn't it just be smarter to lower your volume and not surfaces like 360 to be used for the lane integrity?
Great question. The application of that is challenging. So I can give you firsthand examples. Do a lot of oiling for collegiate events in the space, non-USBC tournaments. And whenever there's a lower volume pattern, it doesn't matter. The sandpaper still comes out every time for at least 50% of the field. And so all you're doing with lower volume is just beating the lane up, and you're going to have guys and gals lofting the gutter cap right out of the gate. So I'm not sure why that is, why the rush is to sand the ball on a lower volume when the pattern's provided, but it's a reality. And so in theory, your question is really good. But in the practical application, I haven't seen a use case for it yet.
Interesting.
A woman on the PWBA threw plastic during warm-ups to stretch the pattern for a show and ended up winning. Will plastic be banned as well eventually?
I mean, I witnessed that. That's a. I'm going to answer it from a tournament standpoint. That's a one-off that you see happen once in a while, where someone's trying to manipulate the pattern. There are rules in place at different events to limit practice to minimize the impact of that. So it's not a huge concern application-wise at a tournament site.
Right. I will say this change, we're not looking at taking away any spare balls here.
Right.
So polyester balls are not being contemplated right now. You won't find them on the ineligible ball list, but it is a fair question. They don't absorb oil. You can throw them down the lane and you can carry down. So it's a fair question. We can't talk about the future until the future comes. But we have thought through all these things, and currently polyester balls, plastic balls are exempt from these rules.
All right. It looks like we are going to go ahead and conclude today's show. We've been on for about 2 hours. Again, we greatly appreciate everybody tuning in to today's show. This is a very hot topic in bowling. A lot of things have been put into this. I learned a lot during today's show. And I want to thank Nick Hoagland for being here today. Nick, do you have any closing thoughts that you would like to say?
No, thanks for being here, and thanks for the great questions. It's great to have a passionate discussion about the future of the sport, which we're all passionate about. Change is difficult and inevitable. So I'm looking forward to taking these new rules of the events and applying the pattern technology to the lane surface over this next year. So it's an exciting challenge in my world as well to get this right. Looking forward to it.
And Tom, for you?
Wise man once told me that, change doesn't always make things better, but things can't get better without change. So I want people to think about, we're never going to make it perfect. We're never going to solve all the problems. But is the future with this rule in place a step in a better direction for the future, or is it a step in a wrong direction? We can very clearly say that we're taking a step here, and we're taking a step for what we think is a better future, a change in the right direction.
All right, there you have it. I want to thank both Nick and Tom for being here today. They are the experts at this. I've been the moderator of this. I've seen a lot of bowling over the years. I, like you guys, have my own opinions about things, but I learned a lot here today, and I've been learning a lot as more information gets released. I do encourage you, again, if you do have any questions that weren't answered here, that the folks here at the bowling headquarters would be more than happy to answer. You can do that at bowlinfo@bowl.com, bowlinfo@bowl.com. They'll answer your questions, and who knows, there may be follow-up shows in the future regarding this, and of course other big topics here in bowling. So for Jason Thomas, for Tom Frenzl, and of course, Nick Hogan, my name is Mike Flanagan from Inside Bowling. It's been a pleasure to bring you this today's special Sport of Bowling show. Make sure you tune in to future Sport of Bowling shows that JT will be back in the seat hosting those right here on YouTube. And you guys have a great day out there. And remember, the future of the sport is bright. A lot of changes are always going to take place. But remember, everybody here is helping shaping it as best as we possibly can so that we can have a great, creative, and great scoring environment out on the lanes for everybody out there. Thanks so much. We'll see you guys later.